Hi, and welcome to another episode of Pashhammer, the home of competitive Warhammer, the old world. If you like battle reports, tactics, reviews, and everything that's going on in Warhammer today, this is the place for you. Please subscribe, like, comment, share with your friends. I really do appreciate it, and hopefully you'll see more content like this in the near future. Today is a very exciting day. I have the full leaked match play guide. I'm going to take you through it step by step, one page at a time. Welcome to Man Reads Book. Let's get on with it. The way this is going to work is I'm going to take you through each page bit by bit. I'll skim over the bits that are probably less relevant to those of you sort of on the scene for a little while and get to the nitty gritty, pointing out any sort of differences that I see between this and previous editions. So let's crack on. This is the contents page. This has already been leaked. Everybody knows this. There's nothing new in this, but this does lay out what we're going to be looking at. So hail to the victor, Valour before Dishonour, organising an event, which is really quite useful, including how GW wants to do their tournament scoring. Army composition, these are restrictions. Actual comp, GW comp is in this as well. The field of battle is all about terrain. The match play scenarios, this is new scenarios that GW have come up, and I'll be honest, some of them look kind of familiar. And then as well as some secondary objectives, additional rules at the end, and also how to do doubles events and team events as well. All of this is in this match play guide. It's very exciting, so let's get on. So, hail to the victor. So this goes on about basically what the Warhammer hobby is. I mean, most of you will be familiar with this. This bit's a bit more interesting. Okay, so one of the greatest joys of Warhammer lies in attending events where a player can enjoy several games over the course of a day of a weekend, facing new opponents, making new friends, and such events can follow many formats, but the most enduring popular is the matched play tournament. At such events, players play a number of games over a number of rounds. The recording of wins and losses allows the organizer to ensure that in each round, each player faces an opponent of a similar level of expertise, one who has recorded a similar number of wins, draws, or losses. At the end of the event, those players that have won the most games are lauded for their achievements, while those that have fared less well plan new muster lists and ponder the injustice of dice. We all love complaining about dice. This book is designed to aid anyone who wishes to run their own match play by providing guidance. The guide covers such subjects as the role and responsibilities of the attendees, the ranking and pairing of players, writing muster lists, placing terrain, and more. The book also contains a number of match play scenarios. Very good. These are designed to challenge players while retaining the game's strong narrative focus. Players are encouraged to use the contents of this book, not just when attending or when preparing to attend a match play event, but also in their regular games. Doing so only adds to the experience of playing Warhammer the Old World. Nice. Just outlines basically what they expect and sets the expectations. This is really good for people who basically have never been before, and there will be people who watch this who never have been to an event. So a really good document to start off with that. Let's look at the next bit. Valour before Dishonour. So this really just outlines the expectations that GW wants you to set. Now this is really interesting because I basically did a video about this about a week ago, and it is all about a code of conduct, the competitive code of conduct, adhered to by all players who play it. So it goes over something like the cardinal rule: in all games, in any environment, players of Warhammer the Old World should endeavour to be polite, courteous, and above all, be truthful with their opponents, always playing the game honestly and openly and never seeking an advantage through nefarious means. That means no gotchas. They should always treat their hosts with respect and should always extend the same level of respect towards anyone giving the time to organize an event, or who is somehow contributing towards another enjoyment of the hobby. Very important. So, some considerations. In addition to the cardinal rules, there are a number of things to consider, especially when attending match play events, where it is quite natural that the competitive nature of the games can unbalance the humours and cause emotions to run amok. So then it goes on about arriving for your game on time and just like basic courtesy bits and pieces. The next bit I think is quite relevant. The clamour of battle. During the course of the game, players should be mindful of behaviour their opponent might find off-putting, distracting, or worst of all, intimidating. This can mean giving the opponent time to think without distracting them, or being mindful of the language one uses. But it can also include such things as asking an opponent's permission before handling their models, or not expressing too much joy or disappointment in the luck or lack thereof that either player has when rolling dice. Very important. Basically, don't be rude. That's what that says, and it has to say it in a book because some people do not do that. On the subject of dice, players should always ensure dice are rolled flat on the surface, clearly visible to their opponent, giving them ample opportunity to see the results of your dice before rolling, picking the dice up, and moving on. In a similar vein, players should always allow their opponent to make their own measurements and give them the opportunity to check distances before any moves are made or dice are rolled. All about having open information, basically, that's what it is. Throughout the course of the game, both players should endeavour to remind their opponent of anything they may have forgotten, giving them the opportunity to do something that might prove important, and players should do this whether it is to their detriment or advantage. This is all about basically gotchas. Don't play with gotchas and be courteous to your opponent, and your opponent will be courteous back to you. Players should avoid manipulating the amount of time a game takes, no stalling, ensuring their opponent has much time as needed to complete their turns, and ensuring as many rounds as possible can be played. Finally, players should be gracious in defeat and humble in victory, congratulating their opponent on a game well played and reliving with them the highs and lows of the conflict. Basically, sportsmanlike behaviour, and I'm glad GW have put this on paper because I think it's definitely something that people forget, and I think it's something that people don't do often enough. So yeah, I'm glad that they've done it. I totally agree, 100%. Let's crack on. So, organising an event. So this is really for TOs or people who like, be organisers, basically. Every event needs an organiser, a person responsible for planning and execution of the event itself. It will be their responsibility to think of things like gaming space, accessibility, getting to and from the venue, terrain, referees, scorekeepers, players, etc. The organiser is in charge on the day, and all players and attendees must accept that the organiser has the final say, and though this should not have to happen, the right to penalise, expel or disqualify anyone for breaking the rules or behaving in an unsuitable fashion. Basically, if you're a dick, you're going to get kicked out, and you shouldn't get away with bad behaviour. It's also the organiser's responsibility to check every player's muster list, ensuring that they have been built to the correct specifications and there are no obvious errors. Organisers can often serve as the referee and or scorekeeper if they wish, although in larger events best to delegate these out. So, scorekeeper. Any match play event will need someone to act as the scorekeeper, which again is often the organiser. At small events, the scorekeeper is responsible for ensuring the results of every game from each round are collected and to rank the players after each round is complete. The scorekeeper is also responsible for pairing players up in each round, making sure event attendees know who they are playing against and which table they are playing on. Pretty standard. Referees. Every event will need a referee, a role that can be easily fulfilled by an organizer at a small event, but at larger events should be delegated to others. It is the job of the referees to ensure the rules of the game, to enforce the rules of the game should the need arise, to answer any rules questions that the players might have, and to resolve any disputes in a calm and impartial manner. Accordingly, a referee should have strong knowledge of the game's rules and have a copy of all the rules, blah blah blah, FAQs, erratas. During the course of the match play event, a referee's ruling is final, and all players must honour the rulings of a referee. This is standard stuff to anybody who has been to competitive events, but if you haven't, this is really good outline, and also just a good reminder for people who can sometimes lapse in these sort of things as well. So, participation. Part of the fun of organising a match play event lies in participating. However, at larger events, it is advisable that not everyone involved with the organisation takes part. Questions can arise at a time, and it is sensible to have a referee available to answer these questions in a timely manner. Essentially, if you are an organiser, you can play in your own event. GW totally recommend it, totally fine, up to a certain amount. Once it gets really busy, you probably want another couple of people stand by to help you with rules, refereeing, taking scores, etc, etc. So yeah, totally fine to play in your own event if you're hosting a smaller event. If it's a larger event, maybe have somebody else to give you a hand as well. Spare player. Should circumstances conspire to prevent a player's attendance, having a spare player to hand, someone able to step in and play a game against an attendee who might otherwise be stranded with no opponent, can prove invaluable. A spare player should not endeavour to win the event and cannot win any awards, but should provide their opponent with a challenging and engaging battle. If necessary, a referee, scorekeeper, or organizer can step in as a spare player, but it is advisable to have someone else ready to step in, the better to allow the organization team to attend to their duties. Then it goes on about attendees, you have to bring your own dice, rule books, etc. Universal rules. All games played at a Warhammer match play use the Warhammer rulebook, Forces of Fantasy, Ravaging Hordes, FAQs, etc, etc. And then here are the sort of universal rules they want you to follow, which take them with a pinch of salt. So, regarding miniatures, players must use official Citadel and Forge World miniatures at the event. This is just a GW thing. Nobody else cares. You can totally use whatever you want. And all models should be fully built, based, painted to a battle-ready standard. That probably should be done across the board. Players must use the appropriate models for their army. Conversions are permitted at the organizer's discretion, and as long as they are clearly represented what they're meant to be. Attendees may wish to show converted models to the organizer prior to the event to ensure no issues arise. Standard stuff, basically. Conduct. All games of Warhammer the Old World should be played in a spirit of friendly competition and fair play. Yes, thank you. This is especially true of matched play, where emotions often run high as players compete to win great glory. All attendees of a match play event are expected to treat one another with respect and behave in a mature and considerate manner, especially during any rules disputes. Yes, thank you very much. This is basically everything that I said in that episode the other week about the competitive code of conduct. Be good, be courteous, be polite, and, you know, just have fun. Don't be a dick, basically. Right, what's next? Aha, scoring and tiebreakers. This is good. This is exciting. This is essentially the 20-0 system. So I'm sorry for those of you who love win-loss-draw. It's not what GW want. So let's just nip that in the bud. In Warhammer the Old World, victory points or VPs are used to determine the victory of each game. And match play games are no different in this regard. This supplement expands on the rules given in Warhammer the Old World rulebook, providing additional rules for determining the winner based upon victory points, the additional ways in which they can be won. Tournament scoring. At the end of each game, both players calculate the total number of victory points they have scored, as described on page 19 of this guide. They then calculate the difference between their victory point scores and consult the table below to determine the result of the game, and to see how many tournament points or TPs they are awarded. And in this table, essentially, you have a 0 to 6 grading system. It's just like 20-0, just on a different scale. There's 6 points to be shared between the opponent, and basically you can either get 0 or you can get up to 6. Starting with a crushing defeat, which is 0 points, resounding defeat is 1, marginal defeat is 2, draw is 3 points each, marginal victory is 4, resounding victory is 5, and crushing victory is 6. Essentially, if you have achieved a crushing victory and your opponent has achieved a crushing defeat, the victor will get 6 tournament points and the loser will get 0 tournament points. Easy peasy. If a player achieves a crushing victory result, then their opponent will suffer a crushing defeat. Okay, yeah, so it just goes over there as well. Yeah. It gives you an example, a match play event where players are fielding 2,000 point armies in their games. Jonathan beats Bob by a victory point difference of 1524. This would mean that Jonathan has won a crushing victory and Bob has suffered a crushing defeat. So awards Jonathan 6 tournament points where Bob would get 0. And then on the next, that just tells about, there goes on about another scenario as well. Recording results. At the end of each game, both players must record the results and report it to the scorekeeper. This includes who won, who lost or drew, how many tournaments were scored by each player, victory points scored by each player, if either player killed the enemy general, as well any other information requested. So all this enemy general stuff and etc. These are all tiebreakers. This really depends on your TO as to which one of these will be relevant. It's definitely worthwhile having a look at it. This is new. Next is actually the victory points table. You ready? There we go. So this is the victory points table. It tells you victory points difference between different game sizes. So from under 1,000 points, 1,000 to 1,500, 1,500 to 2,000. The one in the middle is probably the one that will be used most often. Over 2,000 to 3,000, 3,000 plus. So essentially, say for example, I have won a game by 1,300 points. I am playing a 2,000 point game. The differential here is 1,300 is RV, which is a resounding victory, which would give me, I believe, 5 tournament points and my opponent 1 victory point. Tournament point, sorry. This is the new victory points table. It's very relevant, probably the bit that's going to get most screen captured. So, rankings. Players are ranked according to, this is very important by the way, players are ranked according to the number of tournament points they have scored. The more tournament points a player has, the higher they will be in the standings. When players are tied to the number of tournament points they have, tiebreakers are used to determine their place in the standings. What this means is GW doesn't care how many games you've won, they care how much you've won the games differentials. They would rather somebody won 4 games massively and maybe lost 1 game small, rather than won 5 games with a tiny victory. That's what they're saying in this. That's what GW want, that's what we should do, so let's crack on. It has some suggestive tiebreakers, the first one being total victory points scored. Then it is victory points for secondary objectives, and then enemy general slain. I mean, these are all customizable. Everybody will basically use these at their own discretion. Yeah, nothing too unusual on this one. So yeah, people will do that at different parts. The pairing of players. So there's a few controversial bits in here, and I'll crack on and read it, and you'll see why. Organizing players into pairs is of vital importance, and after the first round, the organizer of a match play event should endeavour to pair together players who have been enjoying similar levels of success. Whilst the organizer of a match play event is free to use any pairing system they wish, the methods detailed on the following pages are recommended. Recommended, not mandatory. See what you think. The first round, players can be paired randomly. If there is an odd number of players, one player will either need to be paired with a spare player or be given a bye. A spare player, if a player has been paired up with a spare player, they will play a game as normal and record the results as they would for any other game. When pairing subsequent rounds, the spare player should be left out and should always play the player at the bottom of the standings. If this player has already played against a spare player, simply pair the next lowest ranked player against them instead. It goes on about buys. Sometimes it's not possible to provide a spare player for your event. In this case, the player that would normally be paired with a spare player will instead receive a bye. A bye counts as having won a crushing victory, and the player counts as having won a number of victory points equal to the size of the games being played. Essentially, you're getting max points. In a 2,000 point game, you're going to get 2,000 points and 6 tournament points, so you're not penalized. Concession: should a player ever concede a game, their opponent is considered to have won a crushing victory, and the player counts as having won a number of EPs equal to the size of the games being played. Essentially the same as a bye. In subsequent rounds, the player who's the highest in the standings will be matched against the player who's second in the standings. Remember, this is on tournament points, not wins. Whilst the player in third place will be matched against the player in fourth, then on. If drawing a round in this way results in 2 players that have already faced one another being drawn to face one another again, the lowest ranked of the 2 players will swap places with the highest ranked player on the table below them. This bit is a bit odd. It's not how most tournaments are done. And let me explain why. It goes to show you an example. So this system should be used for all rounds after the first, including the final round, with but one exception. This is another controversial bit. In the final round, players at the top table should not swap opponents. This says determined by the organizer, but usually the tables on which the top 10 of players are playing. Should not swap opponents if they draw someone they have already played. The 2 are clearly equally matched. The destiny has set them across from another once again. Essentially what they're saying is, in a 5-round event, if you have played one of the people and then you end up in the final round being paired against them, you should not be paired against somebody else if you're within that sort of top bracket. This actually happened to me this week in an online event that I played, where my 5th round opponent was also my 1st round opponent. It was a little bit odd. Most events don't do that, but GW seems to suggest to do it. Use at your own discretion. This next bit here goes on about how to resolve people that have played each other in previous rounds other than the final. So in this example, Dave and Danny have already played one another. Dave and Danny are 3rd and 4th, and therefore cannot play each other again. As Danny is the lowest ranked of the 2, Danny is 4th, he will swap with the highest ranked player on the table below, in which case this is Becky. Becky is 5th. So essentially what they're suggesting is 3rd player plays 6th player and 4th player plays 5th player, which I find a little bit odd, because most of the time what happens is 3rd player would play 5th player and 4th player would play 6th player. That's how most matchups are done, but GW seem to have their own example. So a little bit different. Not, don't take it as gospel, but definitely a really good guideline and recommendation. Army composition, GW comp, and this is the bit that you're probably going to be most excited about. This is it. So, it mentions open war, which is essentially free for all, do what you want. You can take mercenaries, allied contingents, whatever you want. That's just a free play. Grand melee. When using Grand Melee army rules, the focus shifts from mighty wizards, all-conquering lords of war, and gigantic units towards variety of warriors that fill the ranks of the old world's armies. Players are encouraged to field diverse armies of infantry, cavalry, chariotry, rather than rely too heavily upon their might of monsters, characters, or excessively large units. To this end, the following restrictions apply when writing your muster list. You must not spend more than 25% of your army's total points value on a single character or unit. That means no massive Chaos Lords and Dragons, no high elf, fully tooled up high elf dragons, no massive units that are, one unit armies. Your army may include any number of level 1 or level 2 wizards, but may only include 0 to 1 level 3 wizards per 1,000 points, or 0 to 1 level 4 wizards per 2,000 points. This does not apply to named characters, and Grand Melee army composition rules say that mercenaries are okay, allied contingents are at organizer's discretion. Essentially what this says is, at 2,000 points, you can take only one level 4, unless you also have a special character, that is also a level 4. And you can take up to two level 3s, as many level 1s or level 2s as you want. That is what that restriction says. That is only one of two restrictions that are relevant here. I don't see why that can't be relevant to the other one. But it does look like they basically looked at the scene and said, we don't really want to see big, massive one-unit armies and absolutely tooled up Dragon Lords stomping around. Whether that's the right way to comp it or not, this is certainly an example. So let's have a look at the next one, Combined Arms. As described on page 278 of the Warhammer Old World rulebook, the number of some of the available units is restricted. Under Combined Arms army rules, additional limits apply to any units and characters that are not otherwise restricted by the army composition list that you are using. This encourages players to create tactically diverse armies rather than relying too heavily upon a single unit type or the over-proliferation of a certain type of character. Unless a unit or character is already restricted in some way by the army composition list that you are using, a limit of 0 to 3 characters, 0 to 4 core units, 0 to 3 special units, 0 to 2 rare and mercenary units. For example, if you're fielding an Empire of Man army using the Grand Army composition list, you can only include 0 to 1 units of veteran state troops per 1,000 points, but you can field as many units of free company militia as you wish as core choices. When writing your muster list under the Combined Arms rules, you can only include 0 to 4 units of free company militia. The limit on veteran state troops remains unaffected. These numbers increase by 1 for every full 1,000 points of games above 2,000. Units taken as detachments do not count towards these limits. And again, it doesn't say, it says this limit does not apply to named characters, and under Combined Army rules, mercenaries are fine, allied contingents are organizers' discretion. So what this means is essentially, if you are using a 2,000 point army and your army does not have a limit of how many you can take of a certain unit, then these are the limits that you have, essentially 0 to 4 core units. That stops you having, 6 skink units or 12 skink units, or whatever it is. And then there's at 2,000 points, at 3,000 points, that limit goes from 0 to 4 to 0 to 5. Basically, most events already have a 0 to 3 or 0 to 6 restriction in place, so this doesn't really change a lot. This is essentially taking that and adding it to what they fancy. Now, what I do quite like is the fact that they've limited rare options. That's something that Aussie Comp has done, just saying. And they have also limited character options as well. I don't really see anyone spamming characters or core, but I guess 0 to 3 specials, you can't have 12 Shartaks in a warrior's army. Doesn't really do anything. All this really does is it sort of restricts the extreme builds. It doesn't, it doesn't stop anyone playing with the fun stuff. Now, I can't see why you can't apply both the Grand Melee and the Combined Arms composition restrictions to the same event and basically say, no characters over 25% of the army, so essentially 500 points at 2k, 0 to 1 level 3 wizards per 1,000, and 0 to 1 level 4 wizards per 2,000, as well as the rest of the restrictions. I think this is what uncomped Warhammer is going to look like, is basically this. It's not bad. I'm happy to play under that. I don't think there's anything here that's a bad thing. The next bits will provide a bit of flavour and a bit of difference, so let's get on to those. The field of battle. This is all about how to set up terrain, how much terrain you should have. I'll glaze over this bit because it's not, super crunchy. But I do want to say that you have to, how much terrain, you don't want too much or too little. Best guide is to use one terrain feature per 12 inches of the longest table edge. Essentially, 6x4, you want 6 bits of terrain, is what they're saying. As a general rule, terrain feature should be no less than 2 inches and no more than 12 across at its widest point. If it is less than 2 inches across at its widest point, it should be treated as battlefield decoration rather than terrain. I wonder if that means those ultra skinny wood elf forests are not kosher. Yeah, who knows. It goes on about size of terrain, how much you should use, how to place terrain, d3+1, roll 2d6, scatter stuff. I'm not particularly bothered. I'll skip over this. You can sit and read this if you want. It's here. I don't think placing terrain is super exciting, so it is what it is. Matched play scenarios. Now this is quite exciting. So the scenarios present a range of challenges for players to overcome. These might favour a specific type of army or tactical approach over another, and this is quite intentional. Securing victory from adversity is the measure of a skilled general. However, players should be aware that relying too heavily upon a narrow battle plan might lead to a loss. Players are encouraged to write diverse muster lists for match play, capable of dealing with any challenge. In addition, whilst the scenarios that follow are designed for match play events, players should note that they are ideal for use in their regular games. Basically, have at it. Choosing scenarios at the start of each round of a match play event, organizer must determine which scenario will be played, and which, if any, of the secondary objectives will be in use. More on those later. While many organizers will simply choose a scenario ahead of each round, choosing one at random from amongst those that have not been played at the beginning of each round is highly recommended. Essentially, random scenarios each round other than ones that have been played. Can be played again, removing the scenarios, blah, blah, blah. Pre-game special rules. It is not uncommon for one or both players to have special rules that take effect prior to the game beginning. This is like the Thracian difficult terrain, the Wood Elf Forest, bits and pieces like that. Unless stated otherwise, such rules take effect after deployment, but before the first turn begins. Should both players have such special rules or effects, the rule-off should determine which player resolves their effect or special rule first. Players will then alternate back and forth until both players have used any pre-game special rules that they wish to use. Deployment in match play. All match play scenarios use the alternating unit deployment method unless specified otherwise by the scenario. Alternating units. If a scenario calls for players to alternate deployments of such, the winner of a roll-off can choose which player will deploy the first unit. Players then take turns, each deploying a single non-character unit within their deployment zone, saving characters until last. All of the war machines must be deployed at the same time, can be placed at different locations. All of the characters deployed last, placed at different locations. Basically, rule off, winner gets to pick who drops the first unit, and then you do back and forth. That has not changed at all. First turn, bit is different. Once deployment is complete, the winner of a rule-off chooses who takes the first turn. The player that finishes deploying their army first, and this includes units that deploy using the scout special rule, adds the +1 to their roll. What this means is essentially, if I have 5 deployments and my opponent has 5 deployments and scouts, having scouts will automatically mean you lose the +1 to go first. Okay? And that means that if I get the +1 to go first, I win the rule-off, I get to choose who goes first. So it used to be that you have to go first. Now it means you get to choose. So if you would prefer to go second, you can make your opponent go first. And that's a bit of a change, quite a significant one. I think people will like it. Okay, the next bit is about game length. So while most Warhammer, the Old World scenarios detail how long a game should last, under what circumstances a game will end, the match play scenarios that follow each offer a choice of game end conditions. Of these, a fixed turn limit is the default, so basically 6 turns, that's the standard. But Games might end after a random number of rounds have been played, or when one or both armies fall below their breakpoint. At a match play event, the organizer should determine which of the possible end game conditions will apply when announcing the scenario. If there's any doubt as to which end condition is in effect, the fixed turn limit takes effect. So essentially, that's the default, but you can try these ones. Goes on about fixed turn limit being 6. Random game length. If the random game length end condition isn't being used, then the players will roll to determine if the game suddenly ends or continues for another round. Starting at the end of the 5th round, roll a d6, and at the end of each round, and add the net round number to the result. If the result is 10 or more, the battle ends immediately. If the total is less, you continue for at least another round. Essentially means that you can play up to 10 rounds. It's never going to happen at an event, or unlikely to, because usually the round timers will hit that. There is a breakpoint condition as well. If this is being used, players will battle until one or both players reach their army's breakpoint. An army's breakpoint is equal to a quarter of the unit strength of the army at the beginning of the game. To calculate the breakpoint of the army, add together the unit strength of every unit, including characters, in your muster list, and divide the total by 4, rounding fractions down. If at the beginning of any start of turn subphase, the remaining unit strength of either army has fallen below its breakpoint, that army is considered to have broken. At this point, the game ends as models begin to flee, crumble to dust, dematerialize, and so forth. If at the beginning of any start of turn subphase, both armies have fallen beneath their breakpoint, the game will end and the victory points will be totaled as normal. However, as both armies have suffered such terrible losses, a marginal victory is the best result either player can achieve, and a marginal loss is the worst that they can achieve. Match play events must often adhere to strict timings. Whilst a game of Warhammer the Old World can last several hours, to manage this, event organizers may set a time limit for each round. So just telling you that there'll be round timers generally in play. When this is reached, the active player finishes the current phase of their turn and the game ends. So a couple of game ending conditions for you there. See which one you win, which ones you like. The fixed round turn limit is probably the most common one. 90% of events will have that, but maybe sometimes you'll have some slightly different ones. Victory. So this is slightly different and worth looking at. So let's dig in. Battles in the old world are won or lost by whichever general is able to outmaneuver their opponents and lay waste to their enemy with little sign of mercy. As such, in most match play games of Warhammer the Old World, the victor is determined by how many victory points each player is able to win. Victory points, there are a number of ways in which players can win victory points during the course of a match play game, all of which require players to fulfill certain objectives. These fall into 2 distinct categories: common objectives, which are explained below, and secondary objectives, which are covered on another page. Common objectives, these are objectives players can fulfill in most match play games depending upon the scenario being played. The common objective for all match play games and victory points are 1 for fulfilling them as described as follows. So this is standard kill stuff, basically. But there is a few tweaks to the way it was done in the main rulebook, so let's go over it. Dead or fled. The most usual way to win victory points is by destroying, routing, or significantly reducing the fighting strength of the enemy units. Each enemy unit that has been destroyed or has fled off the battlefield is worth a number of victory points equal to 100% of its point cost. Standard, not unchanged. Each enemy unit that is fleeing at the end of the battle is worth a number of victory points equal to 50% of its points cost, rounding factions up. It goes on an example. If a unit of your opponent is worth 351 points to field and it is fleeing, it'd be worth 176 victory points to you when the battle ends. Again, this is standard. This is unchanged. This next bit is slightly different. Each enemy unit that has been reduced to 25% of its starting unit strength or less at the end of the battle, or if its unit strength is equal to its starting wounds, such as behemoths and monsters and things like that, and that's reduced to 25% of its starting wounds or less at the end of the battle, it is worth a number of victory points equal to 50% of its points cost, rounding up. What that means is if you have spent lots and lots of effort to try and get that enemy Dragon Lord down to 1 or 2 wounds, they will likely, almost in all circumstances, be under 25% of the starting unit strength, and you will get 50% of the points cost. So this is something that I've seen come across some events. I'm glad GW have done it as a standard now. It's definitely a positive move. The next bit is the king is dead. It's standard. You get 100 points if you kill the enemy general. That's unchanged. Trophies of War is also mostly unchanged. You get 50 bonus victory points for every enemy standard claimed as a trophy. and then an additional 50 if the enemy battle banner is slain, fled off the battlefield, or is fleeing when the game ends. Special features, again, you get some bonus points for that. Breaking the enemy, this is slightly different. If breakpoint is being used as a game end condition, a player that breaks the opposing army, as described on later, will win a bonus of 500 victory points. So that's slightly different to what it's like now. So this is the new victory conditions, slightly tweaked to what they're like in the main rulebook. All positive changes. Definitely a big thumbs up for me. Very, very much a positive. So now we move on to the new scenarios. There are 6 new scenarios for singles play. I'll go over them. Some of them you'll see are maybe close to scenarios that you will have seen in things like 9th Ed or maybe some other custom scenarios. Clearly, GW are aware of the different ways to play Warhammer, and they have no shame in taking umbrage with that. And to be honest, that's totally fine because it all improves the game. So let's crack on and read the new scenarios. So first one is scenario number 1, Upon the Fields of Glory. As 2 rival forces maneuver into position, an obvious battleground forms between them. Both armies are able to bring their full strength to bear, and the day will be won through skill at arms, unyielding courage, and the wit of cunning generals. This is basically open battle. It's not really anything much too different. So it goes on about how to set up terrain, but we already sort of covered that. Deployment. The winner of the rule-off chooses the deployment zone. Once the deployment zones have been chosen, the winner of this rule-off deploys the first unit, and then you do the alternating unit deployment method. Essentially, you win the rule-off, you deploy first, and you choose which zone you deploy in. This was a standard in previous editions. It sort of got a little bit lost in a lot of events recently, and I'm glad to see the return of it. So definitely a good idea. Game length, it says you can have fixed, random, or breakpoint. No special rules in this scenario. It does mention secondary objectives, which I'll cover in a little bit. Includes the baggage train, the special feature, the domination, and or the strategic location secondary objectives. I'll cover that after all of these are done because it's relevant to all of the scenarios. So essentially, sort of like an open battle. Least exciting one, but bear with me. We'll crack on to the good fun ones. Scenario number 2, King of the Hill. Not only does controlling high ground give a commanding view of the battlefield, a strategically located hill can make for an easy defensible base of operations. One that can become an all but unassailable position. So the setup, again, leave it to the organizer, blah, blah, blah. The only difference here is ensure that a large hill, measuring no more than 12 inches by 18, is placed, that's a very large hill, is placed in the center of the battlefield. Once placed, this hill does not scatter. Deployment is the same as before. Game length is the same. Scenario special rules. The hill. In this scenario, the hill can be controlled at the end of each turn by a single core unit that is within 9 inches of the center, i.e. the center of the battlefield, that has a unit strength of 10 or more, that is not fleeing, has not succumbed to stupidity. If 2 or more eligible units are within 9 inches of the center of the hill, the closest unit controls it. If 2 or more eligible units are equally close to the center of the hill, the unit with a higher unit strength controls it. However, if 2 or more eligible enemy units are equally close to the center of the hill, both have the same unit strength, the hill is contested and neither unit controls it. Essentially, you need unit strength of 10, not fleeing, not stupid, within 9 inches of the center of the board. If you have a higher unit strength, if you're closer, great. If you'll win. If you're equally the same distance, unit strength is what matters. If you're not, it's contested. That's all it is. This next bit's kind of cool. Running uphill. Vanguard moves cannot be made in this scenario, so no vanguarding. Sorry, Brett. The player who controls the hill at the end of each player's turn wins a bonus of 100 victory points. This doesn't say turn 2, turn 3. This means from turn 1. So if you can get to the hill in turn 1, you will get 100 victory points. This means there are 1,200 victory points in this game based on just controlling the hill. Just on that objective alone. Really interesting. It does mention secondary objectives. It may include the baggage train and or any special feature secondary objectives. Something different, quite interesting. Excited to give this one a try. Let's move on to scenario 3. Drawn battle lines. This is sort of like meeting engagement plus, and you'll see why. So, when absolute victory or defeat rests on the outcome of a single battle, generals can be lured into drawing battle lines and joining the fight before the armies have fully mustered. In such circumstances, these committed to the battle line must hope to the reinforcements arrive in a timely manner. Again, setup is standard. Deployment. So you rule off, the winner chooses which table side they have. However, before deploying their army, each player rolls a d6. If either player rolls a 1, both players must choose a single unit from their army whose troop type is infantry or cavalry to be held in reserve. Slightly different to meet an engagement where you roll for every single individual model and unit. Here, you and your opponent roll a d6. If either of those dice is a 1, both of you will have to choose an infantry or cavalry unit to be held in reserve. Once this roll has been made, the player that won the rule off to choose deployment zones deploys the first unit. Units that are not held in reserve can be deployed using the alternating unit method, as described on page 17. During deployment, characters may join units that are being held in reserve as a result of the scenario special rule. In other words, any character can join a unit that are held in reserve, provided they can join a unit. Essentially, what that means is if you are running a lovely, friendly cavalry bus, and you have some characters that have to go in that cavalry bus in order for your plan to work, you can deploy them with you can deploy them in reserve if you want to. This is a really good positive move. It reduces the randomness of how many of your units don't turn up. It's good that both of your opponents are affected. It's something you can plan for. You can have a sacrificial sort of cavalry or infantry unit that, you know, should you draw this scenario and you know, you have to deploy them in reserve, it's not going to affect your battle plan too much. I think this is positive. Very much like it. Game length is usual, fixed turn, random length, etc. It doesn't say breakpoint, but hey, it is what it is. Special rules. Reserves. Reserves are not deployed at the start of the battle. Instead, they enter play during the compulsory moves of any turn of their controller's choosing other than the first. Same as at the moment. When they arrive, reserves may enter the battlefield as reinforcements from any point on a battlefield edge within their deployment zone. I think that means you can deploy it at the side. I'm not sure. Maybe you can. It is in your deployment zone. I need to double check. But I think that might mean you can deploy it essentially halfway up the board. But I need to double check that. Secondary objectives. The scenario must include the strategic locations 3 secondary objective and may include domination and or baggage train secondary objectives. So this is designed to play with strategic locations, which are essentially sort of like capturing little points on the map. And additional secondary objectives. Again, we'll go over these in just a wee while. Meeting Engagement Plus. I like it. It's an improvement. Happily play it. Let's move on to the next one. Brings us on to Scenario 4, Close Quarters. Countless are the vicious and bloody battles that have been fought in the narrow mountain passes of the Old World, where armies are forced to meet one another head-on, with little room to maneuver and retreat, a perilous option. Grim-faced warriors clash to the ringing of steel and echoing battle cries. Battlefield setup is the same as normal. Deployment, same. Winner chooses which zone they're deploying. Once a deployment has been chosen, the winner of this rule of deploys the first unit, alternate unit deployment, etc. Game length is fixed. Turn limit, breakpoint. That's the only two that they recommend. Fine. So, it's got special rules. Bottleneck. The battle is fought in a narrow mountain pass enclosed by high cliffs. Because of this, the short battlefield edges are impassable terrain. No unit can leave or enter the battlefield via the short edges unless they have the ethereal or fly special rule. And it mentions that you should have strategic locations, secondary objective, and you can include the domination one. What this means is essentially, it's sort of like Battle for the Pass, Mountain Pass, but instead of the long edges being impassable, it's actually the short edges, which is nice. I've not played that before. I think that's a nice level of, it'll have an effect on the game, but not an overwhelming one like Battle Pass or Battle for the Pass or Mountain Pass does. So yeah, cool. Something new, something fresh. I've not seen this before. Quite a novel way of taking something that exists already and making it different. Looking forward to giving this one a try. So we'll see how it goes. And that moves on to Scenario 5, a chance encounter. This is when things start to get a little bit fruity. Either by luck, misfortune, or wild circumstance, two enemy armies stumble into one another in the fog of war. Battle forces scramble to prepare for battle and defend their supply lines, eager to seize upon the chance to deal a significant blow to their foes if either can marshal their forces in time. The setup is the same. Deployment. This is where things get interesting. The winner of a roll-off chooses their deployment zone. So you choose a table quarter, essentially. and your opponent gets the other table quarter. Blah, blah, blah. Once the deployment zones have been chosen, the winner of the rule-off deploys the first unit. There's an 18-inch circle around the middle of no deployment, and essentially that's to stop you guys being too close. But you deploy your whole army in a table quarter, which is different. This is something new. Game length, random game length, breakpoint, fine. No special rules. And in terms of secondary objectives, it recommends special features and can include domination and or baggage train secondary objectives. This is different. This is something new. I've not seen this before. It feels a bit fruity, but actually, I'd happily give it a go. I think it can work. Time will tell if it is crazy or workable. Give it a try. See what you think. And the last scenario for the singles is encirclement. Whilst many generals believe that glory can be won by driving through the heart of the enemy, others will attempt to outflank and encircle their foes, crushing the flanks of the enemy beneath the relentless advance of their army. The setup is much the same. Deployment. Once the battlefield has been set up, the winner of a roll-off chooses their deployment zone, as shown on the battlefield. Once deployments have been chosen, the winner of this roll-off deploys the first unit, etc., alternating deployment zones. So the deployment for most of these is much the same, really. Game length, this can have any of them. Fixed game turn, random game length. I'm sure you could use breakpoint if you really wanted to. No special rules. Secondary objectives it recommends are strategic locations, baggage train, and any special feature locations that you fancy. Just a slightly odd deployment, open battle type game, really. Sure, cool, sounds good. No problem with that at all. So we've been talking about these secondary objectives in all of these previous scenarios. So what are they? Let's go over them in detail. Whilst the spectacle of two rival armies drawing battle lines across an open field in preparation for a grim and bloody battle is unmistakably captivating, battles in the old world are seldom as simple as it seems. Armies vie for control of land, to pretend sacred sites, to seize vital resources, or to burn and scatter an enemy's victuals. Using secondary objectives. During the course of a match play event, the organizer may choose to apply one or more secondary objectives to any scenario. Each scenario includes recommended secondary objectives chosen to work best with that scenario, but organizers are free to use any of the secondary objectives listed on the following pages in any scenario. Secondary objectives are as follows, and victory points are won for them as described in the following pages. Basically, they give you bonus victory points. That's all secondary objectives do. Baggage train, you've heard about this one in a few of the scenarios before. The destructions of an army's supply train can bring a campaign to a grinding halt as soldiers succumb to the need to find food and fresh water. To represent this, baggage trains may be used as a secondary objective. A baggage train should be represented by a miniature diorama occupying a 60 by 100 mil base. Baggage trains are treated as dangerous terrain for the purposes of movement, are ignored for the purposes of a line of sight. In terms of placing baggage trains, they are placed after the battlefield has been set up, but before deployment begins. Each player places their baggage train on the battlefield so it is wholly within the deployment zone and at least 3 inches away from any battlefield edge. Baggage trains may not be placed within a terrain feature or any type of straddling a low linear obstacle. Once placed on the battlefield, a baggage train cannot be moved for any reason. Essentially, it's a piece of terrain that you place somewhere in your deployment zone that is not in a exact corner, like 3 inches away from any battlefield. It does not move, and it can be controlled and it can be destroyed. A baggage train can be controlled by a single unit that is within 6 inches of it, that has a unit strength of 10 or more, that is not fleeing, and that is not succumbed to stupidity. If 2 or more eligible units are within 6 inches of a baggage train, the closest unit controls it. However, if 2 or more eligible enemy units are equally close, the baggage train is contested and neither unit controls it. Destroying it. A unit with a unit strength of 5 or more can attempt to destroy the enemy baggage train by moving it into base contact with it during the remaining move subphase. Once a unit is in base contact with the enemy baggage train, it begins the process of destroying it. Shattering wagon wheels, sending camp attendants fleeing, and putting supplies to the torch. Whilst a unit is in base contact with the enemy's baggage train, it cannot shoot and can only cast spells with the range of combat or self. If, at the beginning of the next start of turn phase, the unit is still in base contact with the baggage train, has a unit strength 5 or more, is not engaged in combat, and is not fleeing, the baggage train is destroyed and removed from the battlefield. So essentially, What that means is in order to destroy somebody's baggage train, you need a unit strength of 5 or more. You move into base contact with this baggage train, enemy baggage train, of course, and you have to be there at your next start of turn. So you have to be there throughout your whole opponent's turn and then back into your start of turn. Now remember, it doesn't block line of sight or anything like that, so your opponent can shoot you, your opponent can charge you, everything. But if you do manage to destroy it, for each baggage train a player controls at the end of the battle, that player wins a bonus of 100 victory points. If a player destroys their opponent's baggage train, they win a bonus of 250 victory points. That's quite significant, actually. Those are decent numbers. Essentially, if you control both, you get 100 victory points for yours and 100 victory points for your opponents. If you destroy your opponents, that's 250 victory points. Yeah, so that can really swing. That can really swing a game. You've got what, 350? Yeah, 350 victory points that you can have on the table by having the baggage trains secondary objective. Kind of cool. Not a massive fan of changing what unit strength you need to control it, what unit strength you need to destroy it. Why? That's just confusing. But it's something different. Give it a try. See what you think. Special features. In match play scenarios, a special feature is a terrain feature that represents an important landmark upon the battlefield. This might be a grand statue depicting a noble hero, an arcane monolith, a magical energy, some other towering edifice of unknown origin. To represent such a landmark, a special feature may be used as a secondary objective. A special feature is a terrain feature, measuring no more than 6 inches at its widest point. All special features are impassable, over which no line of sight can be drawn. Placing special features when you set up it must be placed in the center of the battlefield, and it does not scatter. Controlling it during each start of turn subphase, a special feature can be controlled by a single core unit that is within 6 inches of it, that has a unit strength of 10 or more, not fleeing, not succumb to stupidity. If 2 or more eligible units within 6, the closest unit. If they're equally close, the highest unit strength wins. And then you can contest it. Victory points. Controlling an important landmark is a significant achievement. To represent this, if either player controls a special feature at the end of the battle, they win a bonus of 200 victory points. And that's not all. They have some unusual properties as well. Special features are possessed of ever-changing and highly unusual properties. During the start, any start of turn subphase in which a unit is determined to be in control of a special feature, that unit's controlling player rolls on the table below to determine the special feature's current unusual property. The controlling unit benefits from the unusual property until the end of the turn. They are all good, really quite good. So the d6 table is as follows. On a roll of 1 or 2, a tingle in the air around the special feature tingles strangely, and those that stand too close to report a funny taste in their mouth. Whilst the unit controls the special feature, it gains magic resistance 3. There's very, very few instances of magic resistance 3 in the game. I can only think of like High Elves, Banner, and maybe dwarves have it, but yeah, it's nasty. Magic resistance 3 is powerful. On a roll of a 3 or 4, honor thy forebears. Filled with a sense of righteous pride by the sight of the special feature, those that control it will defend it vigorously. Whilst a unit controlling this special feature, it grants hatred all enemy special rule. Massive. If you're beside that, if you put your unit right beside it, you've got hatred and rerolls against anybody who charges you. That is mad. That is really good. And on a roll of a 5 or 6, an inspirational sight. The special feature fills all who look upon it with courage and inspires them to ever greater acts of bravery. Whilst the unit controls the special feature, it gains the unbreakable special rule. Fantastic. Special rule, unbreakable is pretty good. Undead will care about that a little bit less, probably. I think hatred is probably the one that you really want. Magic res is really good as well. I like it. It's cool. It's definitely usable. I'm not a fan of them saying it has to be a core unit within 6 inches, unit strength 10 or more. There's a lot of flipping and flopping between what units can control it. In some instances, it's a core unit. In some instances, it can be any unit. In some places, it has to be unit strength 5. Sometimes it's unit strength 10. There's unit strength 15 requirement later on. It's a lot to keep in mind. But on the surface, it's something unique, something different. Maybe with a bit of refining, I think this could be a very, very usable part of the game. Let's look at the next bit. So this next bit is all about how to run doubles events. This is really quite cool. It's not something I've seen GW put down on paper other than for maybe specific events. Obviously, they're doubles events, but it's really cool to see how they want you to sort of structure doubles events. So I'll read this as it's displayed. Doubles events are ever popular and enjoyable, joining forces with a friend, using your collective gaming experience, seeking victory, and combining your collections to create a single army are just some of the reasons why double events are well attended. The following pages introduce some additional rules for anyone wishing to run a doubles event, or simply for playing doubles against regular opponents. Army composition. A doubles army will always consist of 2 muster lists, one of which will be the primary force, and the other which will be the secondary force, each controlled by a different player. Each muster list must be built to the same points limit, with each making no more than half of the total points limit, and following the usual rules for match play army composition. Named characters are unique, each may only be included once in a doubles army. Doubles teams should choose which army composition list to draw their primary force from first, and then draw their secondary force from either any of the army composition lists found under the ally section of the primary force, or from the same army composition list. What that means is, if I take a high elf force as a primary muster list, my doubles partner can take the... if I take a high elf grand army, my doubles partner can take a Thracian high elf army as the secondary force, or they can take a Bretonnian one as allies, or I think they can even take Empire as allies as well. You have a primary force, and then the other force is like allies, essentially. You follow all the usual restrictions that you would. You cannot have the same one in both. You can't have both people take High Elves Grand Army. You cannot have the same special character either. And that basically goes on about this. Also, it says you can't share unspent points. So, like, if one person has 994 and the other player has like 1,000, they can't get like 1,005. They can't use your spare points, basically, which is fair enough. In doubles play, players treat their partner's force as if it was an allied contingent, using the special rules outlined in the main rulebook. When determining the type of alliance between the 2 contingents, most alliances will be trusted. Sometimes they may be uneasy or suspicious. In such cases, the alliance between the 2 forces is more fractious than most, and will follow the rules in the main rulebook. And it goes on about example, and then it mentions scenarios. At a doubles event, organizers should default to using the double scenarios on the following pages. If the event runs for more than 3 rounds, you're free to either repeat any other doubles scenarios, or play with different secondary objectives, or use any of the standard match play scenarios. So after this, there are 3 new doubles scenarios, which is quite cool. And I think this suggests to me that they want you to play this over one day. One day, 3 games. Maybe the second day you mix things up if that's what you want to do. Let's have a look at the scenarios. So first, we'll have a look at the rules considerations. So due to the nature of doubles events, certain rules, such as game end conditions and what is required to fulfill certain common objectives, change slightly. Below are the key changes from a standard match play game used in doubles. Breakpoint. If the breakpoint game end condition is being used at a doubles event, work out the combined unit strength of both players' forces to determine the breakpoint of the army overall. Makes sense. Absolutely no different there, really. The king is dead. When scoring the king is dead, common objective at a doubles event, if the enemy general of the primary force has been slain, has fled off the battlefield, or fleeing, you get a bonus of 100 victory points. If the general of the secondary force is slain or fleeing, you get 50 victory points. So basically, if your primary general is dead, it's 100 victory points bonus. If your secondary general is dead, that's 50 victory points, slightly reduced. And the trophies of war are much the same. Additionally, trophies of war is you still get 50 bonus victory points for every enemy standard you destroy in either the primary or the secondary force. You get a bonus 50 victory points if you destroy the battle standard bearer of the primary force, and you get an additional 25 victory points if you destroy, kill, flee the battle standard bearer of the secondary force. So just a slight tweak to the rules there. Let's have a look at the scenarios. So the first scenario is a double envelopment. This is quite free, quite exciting. I would love to see this played out. So as 2 generals array their warriors for battle, their allies race towards the field. With the battle lines well and truly muddled, friends must fight through the enemy in order to regroup and establish a semblance of order. Terrain setup as usual. Deployment. once the deployment zones have been chosen, the winner of this roll-off deploys the first unit belonging to their primary force. Players deploy their primary forces using the alternating unit deployment. Both teams' secondary forces are held in reserve. The game length, it says, is fixed turn or breakpoint. Special rules, reserves. Reserves are not deployed at the start of the battle. Instead, they enter play during the compulsory move subphase of any turn, including the first of their controller's players' choosing. When they arrive, reserves will enter the battlefield from the short battlefield edge, indicating the deployment map below. However, should their controlling players wish, war machines belonging to the secondary force may instead be deployed with the primary force. But if you look at the map, essentially, you will be deploying either side of the other team's primary force. So they're going to get rear charged by stuff coming on the board. That's quite cool. That's quite exciting. Something different. You will start basically neck and neck, which means you can be within easy charge distance in turn one. This is quite a bloody scenario, but cool, exciting. I mentioned secondary objectives. You can take baggage trains, special features, domination, strategic locations, etc., etc. So quite a cool little first scenario. Would be quite fun to play it. See what you think. Scenario number 2. Forward battle lines. So through the vanguard, though the vanguard of an enemy army often hosts its best and strongest warriors, they are seldom the first to whet their blades when the battle is met. Units of scouts and light cavalry engage in lightning-fast skirmishes on the battle's edge, long before the lumbering formations of infantry edge towards one another. Infantry? Ooh. Setup is the same. Deployment, again, roll off and deploy. The winner of this roll off deploys the first unit, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's nothing too special there. Game length is fixed turn, random game length, no special rules. Secondary objectives as baggage trains and or strategic locations as a secondary. We haven't mentioned strategic locations. I will mention that in just a second. But there you go. Now this to me looks like something out of Ninth Age. I'm pretty certain I've played this type of scenario before. But at least they're using it. They're using what's available to them. It's something different. It looks quite interesting. Give it a go. See what you think. Right. Double scenario number 3. The Old Outpost. Though this aging tower has long been abandoned, it was once a vital watchtower whose garrison stood sentient over the land 4 leagues in each direction. Sentient? Sentinel. Sentinel. Sentient towers, jeez. Now, as the war once again plagues the region, the old tower's commanding view of the surrounding countryside is something neither force can afford to relinquish without a fight. The setup is the same, and then it mentions a single special feature representing the abandoned outpost is placed in the center of the battlefield. I guess it could be a hill or a building or anything. Yeah, alternating unit deployment, that doesn't change. Game length, random game or breakpoint, no special rules, but it does say special secondary objectives. It must include the special feature secondary objective and may include the baggage train and or strategic locations 4 in this. So this is sort of like meet and engagement and a different sort of deployment with a big hill or tower in the middle that gives you magic res, hatred, and unbreakable to your a core unit that's controlling it. So that's quite cool. Very fun, very themed. That's basically doubles for you. It's a very fun way to play Warhammer. I definitely recommend it. I'm looking forward to seeing more doubles events come up now. They have a very easy format to follow. So here's hoping that comes into play next. And now we talk about Warhammer Teams play. This is quite exciting. I've not seen GW do a Teams format before. This is straight out of the likes of the ETC, WETC. And a lot of it has similarities that they've clearly been inspired by. So I think it's really worthwhile. Let's have a read and see how they suggest doing a Teams event. So they call it an Alliance of Warlords. Team events offer players another thrilling opportunity to enjoy battles set in the old world, allowing them to come together and defeat their enemies. Instead of battling through the highs and lows of match play event alone, team events let groups of friends stand together as one, taking on all who would oppose them, and proving that they are the mightiest heroes or the deadliest villains in all of Old World. For many players, being able to revel in the excitement of an event with friends and comrades is one of the best aspects of attending a Warhammer the Old World event. It is for this reason that Teams events are often touted as people's favorite events to attend. And this is true. If you played in a Teams event before, many people will say this is the best way to play Warhammer. Definitely recommended to give it a try if you can. So, team events. The following pages present some additional rules for anyone wishing to organize a team event, including rules, considerations, or amendments that must be made to accommodate teams of players rather than individuals. There are also all of the rules for players wanting to form a team, as well as guidance on the writing of muster lists for team events and how such events are scored. A team event will use the standard match play scenarios found in this guide, so the first 6 that we talked about earlier, and will determine them in the same way as a standard match play event. All members of the team will play the same scenario in each round. This is interesting because I know there's a lot of chat about the WTC at the moment. Maybe this will give people some food for thought, so see what GW think. How to gather your allies. Throughout the tumultuous history of the old world, there are countless stories of people coming together in times of great hardship and struggle, finding victory through their united effort and unwavering loyalty to one another. As such, finding a group of like-minded friends, be they champions of good or notorious villains, it is the first step on your team event journey. Team size. Anyone wishing to organize an event will need to decide how many players each team will contain and convey that information to hopeful attendees. The teams can be whatever size the organizer wishes. Some teams may require teams as small as 3 players, while much larger ones may ask for teams of 8 or even 9 players, such as the WTC. Organizers are free to decide what size of team event is best for the event, but we find that teams of 4 work best. 4 is quite a nice little number as well, so you can have more teams that way as well. It's quite a good way to recommend it. For ease, the format presented here will assume that teams consist of 4 players. If you wish to run an event with more or fewer than 4 players, you will need to adapt some of the rules that follow to accommodate these numbers. Nominating a team captain, it is the role of a team captain to organize their team, and all information needs to be passed down before and during the event. The team captain will be responsible for such things such as organizing list submissions, collecting together and handing results to the scorekeeper, and passing any information from the organizers to the rest of the team. It's usually best for the most organized member of the team or the person with the most experience of match play events to take on this responsibility, as it will often ensure that the things run nice and smoothly. Basically, delegate the team responsibility of a captain to the dad of the team. Or the mum. Mums are way more organized. Let's have a look and see what else this has in store. Muster for war. Each player will need an army of which to wage war for the duration of the event. Rules for writing a muster list can be found before. However, as players are competing as part of a team, there are a few additional factors that we'll need to take into consideration when writing their muster lists. At team events, each Grand Army composition list and Army of Infinite composition list can only be used once in each team. This means teams will need to work together throughout the army building process to ensure that each player is drawing their force from a unique army composition. What this means is GW are happy for you to take Warriors of Chaos Grand Army, Warriors of Chaos Heralds of Darkness, and the Warriors of Chaos Wolves of the Sea in the same team. This is not how it's generally done across other teams events I've been to, but it's how they recommend to do it. Take it with a pinch of salt. Named characters. Fate of the Old World has long been battled over by champions of good who fight for justice and honor, and the servants of evil who seek domination and destruction over all else. Yet even these heroes, as mighty as Ungrim Ironfist, or villains as cunning as the Bray Shaman Crawlmaw, can only be in one place at a time. As such, each named character may only be included once within a team. This means that multiple players in the same team cannot field the same named character in their muster lists. Basically, if you have a team of 4 players and 3 of them are different flavors of Bretonia, you can't all take the Green Knight. What a shame. This is probably never going to come up because it's very rare to have teams events with allowing the same factions. But maybe GW will host them. Maybe they'll do a teams event. Maybe you want to run one. Yeah, it's kind of cool. Something different. It goes on about scoring and tiebreakers as well. So, in a team event, individuals score tournament points as normal, following the standard rules for scoring and tiebreakers we mentioned before, the 0 to 6 system. At the end of each round, the tournament points scored by each member of a team are added together, giving a team's tournament point score for the round. This means there's a maximum of 24 tournament points available per round at events with 4 players per team, because 6 times 4 is 24. It mentions an example. Jonathan's team achieves 3 crushing victories and a draw. The team scores 21 tournament points, 6 points for each crushing victory and 3 for the draw. As the event progresses, a team's tournament point score accrues after each round, giving the team's total tournament point score. This means that in a 5-round tournament, a team could accrue a maximum of 120 tournament points, as in 24 times 5 in a 4-player event. Just an example. At the end of each round, players must record the results of their game, hand it over to the team scorekeeper, blah, 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 blah. That's pretty standard. Ranking. At team events, players are working together to achieve victory, so that the ranking system works slightly differently to a standard matched play event. Players are not ranked individually, but instead ranked as a team, using their combined tournament points as described previously. This means that teams are matched up against other teams on similar numbers of TPs, rather than individuals being matched against one another. Makes sense. Tiebreakers, where teams are tied on the number of tournament points. There are a number of tiebreakers to use to determine which team is higher placed. These tiebreakers are very similar to the standard match play tiebreakers, but they are cumulative. First tiebreaker it recommends is team's total victory points difference, which is the total number of victory points scored by all players across all of their games, minus the total number of victory points conceded by each player across all of their games. And it gives you an example saying Jonathan's teams have played 4 games, scoring a total of 6,725 victory points and conceding a total of 2,375 victory points. This makes their victory point difference 4,350. Second tiebreaker recommends if the teams are still tied after competing the victory points differential, which would be rare. The second tiebreaker is the team's total number of victory points scored by each player across all their games. Essentially, you add up all the victory points you've scored. Third tiebreaker is how many generals you've slain. These tiebreakers, I think, will be used in different ways, but there's some really good basis for a team's event there, and I think it's definitely something that a lot of communities will want to see going forward, and maybe we'll even see it being played this year in Germany. Who knows? Okie dokie, so in terms of actually doing the matchups, the pairings, it's pretty recognizable to anyone who's ever done a team event. It's fairly standard. They have slightly different terms for how they call each of the players, but overall it's pretty straightforward. So let me just go over it. So it says you have to pair teams randomly, then pair individual players with using the team pairing system. So, and then also mentions that teams are paired based on their rankings further down. Once the teams have been paired, they must decide who plays who from each team. The teams should be given 15 minutes to do this before the start of the round. Usually this takes longer, but never mind. During the time, teams are allowed to review the other team's muster lists and must be told clearly who and which player is using which army list. Work through the following steps to determine individual matchups, and throughout these steps, both teams choose players in secret and put them forward before revealing their choices simultaneously. So step 1 is both teams choose one member to be their vanguard player. Essentially, you put one player forward, revealing their choices simultaneously. Step 2, both teams then choose and put forward 2 of their members to be what they're called battle line players. Essentially, you put these forward to your opponent's vanguard player, and the vanguard player gets to choose one of your battle line players to play against. The last player is the remaining player is called rearguard players in this instance. And the way this works is essentially each team's rearguard player is matched up against the opposing team's unmatched battle line players. So what they've done here, let me show you. So they put Bob and Ethan as the vanguard players, and then they have given Bob the option of Dan or Alistair, and for Ethan the option of Jonathan or Dave. Okay, so Bob's chosen Alistair, which means Dan, the person that he rejected, plays the rearguard player, the player that wasn't put up, which in this case was Connor. From the opposite team, Ethan chose Dave, which means Jonathan got rejected, and Jonathan now plays Agatha, which is the other rearguard player that they've got there. And that's the pairings, as you've got. Let me show these so that you can see them properly. Bob versus Alistair, Dave versus Ethan, Jonathan, Agatha, Connor, and Dan. Anybody who's ever done pairings before, it's here. I think it's really useful being able to see this as a worked example because for anybody who's not been involved in team sway before, it can be a bit confusing, but you get the hang of it once you've done it a couple of times. So actually, it's fairly straightforward. There is, of course, strategy to it, but it's good to have it laid out in full. So there are some additional rules when playing with teams. As well as the match play format we have already covered, there are many other wonderful adaptations that organisers enjoy implementing to present fresh challenges to players. In this section, we'll cover escalation events and how to add secret objectives to your match play events. So these additional rules are just additional rules overall. They can be for your singles match play, they can be for doubles, they can be for teams, or for other formats as well. So one of the formats is called escalation. Escalation events see players begin with a smaller army, adding more units and more characters prior to subsequent rounds, but you cannot remove anything in a later round. In this way, players must field an army that consistently changes over the course of the event, presenting them with a fresh challenge overcoming each round. For example, a 2-day event, players might begin with a 1,000-point army, which they will use for the first 2 rounds. This army will then increase to 1,500 points for the second 2 rounds, before increasing to 2,000 points for the final 2 rounds. It's a 6-round event for this example. There are a couple of things that are important to remember when running an escalation event. At the start of the event, players will need to submit all of their muster lists for the whole points value, increased points values, etc., etc. So quite a nice little concept. I've not played escalation events before. It'd be kind of cool to give it a try. So see how it goes. Secret objectives. These are additional ways to score victory points that I think are going to become a big factor going forward. So listen to this next bit. These are a range of additional objectives the players may try to achieve for additional victory points. The twist is that not all secret objectives are achievable by every army or in every game, and that with each passing round, the players must choose a single objective from a diminishing pool. When writing your muster list for a matched play event at which secret objectives are in use, each player must choose and list 6 objectives from the 12 detailed over the following pages. At the start of each game, each player must choose one of their secret objectives and make a note of it on a piece of paper, which should then be placed face down at the edge of the battlefield. Bit annoying. Hopefully you can sort that out with cards. At the end of the game, when calculating victory points, both players reveal their secret objective. If either has achieved their objective, they win victory points as stated in the secret objective description. After each round, when submitting results to the scorekeeper, each player must also record which secret objective they chose for that round and whether they were successful in achieving it. Once a secret objective has been selected, it cannot be selected again for the remainder of the event. Okay, I like the concept of it. Secret objectives sounds like fun. I don't like the admin of it. How are you going to submit this based on the platforms that we have at the moment? They're not going to be open? Are they going to be open secret objectives? I'd rather they weren't. Otherwise, that defeats the whole point of them being open. Sorry, secret objectives. And you'll see there's a little bit of admin involved in the way that these fall out. Some of them are a bit easier than others. So let me have a look. Okay, first one, it's fairly straightforward. Assassination. To fulfill this objective, you must kill all of your opponent's characters. Any enemy character that had fled off the table or are fleeing at the end of the battle counts as towards fulfilling this role. If you fulfill this objective, you win a bonus of 150 points. That's quite a lot of points. It's also quite hard to kill all of your opponent's characters. But if you think you'll do it, I guess you'll probably choose this one. Magical Dominion. To fulfill this objective, you must successfully cast 3 spells during a single turn without having them dispelled by your opponent and without suffering a miscast during the same turn. If you fulfill this objective, you win a bonus of 75 points. How are you going to remember that during the game? I don't know. I think in the middle of the game, you're just going to forget that 75 points. So that's going to be tricky. Don't like the extra admin there. Duel of Kings. To fulfill this objective, you must kill your opponent's general in a challenge. If you fulfill it, you get 200 victory points. Significant amount. Definitely worth it. Achievable, I think, as a battle plan. So yeah, that one's pretty good. Calming of the Winds. You fulfill this objective once each time you dispel one of your opponent's spells with a fated dispel. Each time you fulfill this objective, you win 50 VPs. Again, admin, how are you going to remember? Are you going to take a note of every single spell you dispelled with a fated one, and then at the end of the game, you're going to tell your opponent, oh yeah, I dispelled 6 of your spells. They'll just have to trust you. Not a fan of that. But some will be stronger than others. Beast Hunter. To fulfill this, you must kill all units in your opponent's army whose troop type is monster. Any enemy units whose troop type is monster that have fled the battlefield or are fleeing count towards fulfilling it, and you get 100 points. I guess don't choose this if you're playing against dwarves because they won't have monsters. Yeah, it's an interesting one, I guess. But again, fairly easy to see if you have or haven't done it by the end of it. Wizard's Bane. To fulfill this objective, you must successfully dispel 3 of your opponent's spells in a single turn without being outclassed in the archer in the same turn, and you get 75 victory points. Again, admin, how are you going to remember that's been done? Not a fan of that one so much, just from a purely admin perspective, so I don't think it'll be remembered. Right, there's 6 more. Okay, hold the line. To fulfill this objective, you must have 2 of your units, each with a unit strength of 10 or more, not counting units that are fleeing or stupid, within your opponent's deployment zone at the end of the battle. If you fulfill it, you get 75 points. Yep, easy to track, fairly achievable. Overwhelming firepower. To fulfill this, you must destroy an enemy unit in the shooting phase that began the phase with a unit strength of 10 or more. If you get it, you get 75 points. Again, are you going to remember that? I'd almost rather you just flip the card when you achieved it rather than keeping it secret till the end of the game, because you're not going to remember, and your opponent certainly isn't. Cut off their retreat. To fulfill it, you must have 1 of your units with a unit strength of 15 or more, not counting units that are fleeing or stupid, within 6 inches of the longest edge of the battlefield within your opponent's deployment zone at the end of the battle. Ugh. If you do, you get 75 victory points. Okay. Easy to remember if you've done it, but one more thing where it's like unit strength 5, unit strength 10, unit strength 15, which one is it? Sort of tricky to remember off the top of your head, so yeah. I hope, yeah, tricky. All right, fire the artillery. To fulfill this one, you must cause an enemy unit to fail a panic test and flee as a result of being shot at by a unit whose unit type is War Machine. If you fill it, you get 100 points. So basically, you're trying to panic and flee a unit with a War Machine. That's actually harder than it seems, because you only panic and flee when you have taken, 25% casualty or over 25% casualties, and like only if you like cannon down the side of a unit that's already low strength are you likely to get it. That's actually quite a tricky one. And on top of that, there's a lot of things that either automatically pass panic tests or are undead and don't care about panic tests. So I don't actually see that one being too easy to get. Okay, next one, captured colors. You fulfill this objective by capturing enemy standards as trophies of war. So if you capture 2 enemy standards, you get a bonus of 50, 3 enemy standards, a bonus of 100, and 4 or more enemy standards with a bonus of 150. Yeah, that's easy enough to calculate at the end of the game. You might get a bit confused with counting all your banners and all the bits and pieces that you get. So it's okay. It's a decent one. Like it's workable. Last but not least is Bounty Hunter. To fulfill this objective, you must kill the most expensive unit in your opponent's army. Units that have fled off the battlefield or are fleeing count towards it. If you get it, you get 75 points. This one actually is one that used to be in the past, so definitely a blast from the past, this one. So yeah, totally fine. Overall, objectives, secret objectives, kind of cool. It can really come down to a very small margin in some of these games. So I think 75 points here, 50 points there, it can all add up. Whether you're actually going to remember it, whether you're going to get it accurately, I think that's another matter altogether. I like these. I like where they're going. Some of them are really easy to remember. Others require far too much admin and will definitely lead to mistakes. So I think maybe these, refined, maybe by the community, could be quite a good addition to any sort of battle line there as well. Okay, so another couple of bits and pieces. Domination. Breaking the enemy, driving them from field of battle, and forcing them to flee to the distant hills is the surest way for an army to win the day. To represent this, domination may be used as a secondary objective. If so, the battlefield is divided into 4 equal quarters by drawing 4 marginally lines. 2 from the middle, blah, blah, blah. Basically, it's table quarters. So to control a table quarter, it is determined at the end of the game. The players add together the unit strength of each of their models that is completely within each quarter, not counting fleeing models. The player that has the highest unit strength within a quarter controls it. This is a little bit awkwardly worded. The players add together the unit strength of each of their model that is completely within each quarter. So if you have a unit straddling 2 quarters, and it's bang on the line, half of them will count towards one quarter, half of them will count towards another. It's a bit awkward. The player that has the highest unit strength within a quarter controls it. Okay, for each quarter of the battlefield a player controls, you get a win bonus of 100 points. In addition, if the unit strength of the models controlling a quarter is more than twice that of the enemy, the controlling player wins an additional 50 victory points. If the player controls a quarter uncontested, if their opponent has a unit strength of 0 within that quarter, the controlling player wins an additional 100. I think that's instead. So you could, technically, if you completely wipe your opponent, you could get like a grand total of what, 800 victory points? That's a very win more scenario. Yeah, interesting. Something different. Table quarters was always an objective previously. 8th edition, maybe 7th edition. So it's something that's come back. Totally fine. Don't mind it. Give it a try. I think the wording could be clarified a little bit better. So these strategic locations, we've seen a few of these pop up. So controlling key points upon the field of battle is vital for success in war. To represent this, strategic locations may be used as a secondary objective. If so, a number of objective markers equal to the number shown in the brackets, shown by X, are placed on the battlefield as shown opposite. Objective markers should be presented by a miniature diorama, 40mm base, round base. They count as a type of battlefield decoration. They can represent many things: wells, freshwater, blah, 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 treasure chests. Okay, placing objective markers are placed after battlefield has been set up, but before deployment. Never within 3 of a terrain feature or straddling a low linear obstacle. I mean, if you're not within 3 of a terrain feature, you don't need that second part of the line. But anyway, if necessary, move the terrain by the smallest possible amount to allow the objective marker to be placed. Controlling objective markers. At the end of each turn, an objective marker can be controlled by a single core unit within 6 inches, unit strength 10 or more, not fleeing or stupid. If 2 or more eligible units, it's the closest, and then if it's higher unit strength, and then contested. For each objective marker a player controls at the end of each player's turn, they win a bonus of 30 victory points. So this is a way for you to basically go and sit on an objective and collect victory points at the end of each turn. Starting from turn 1, it doesn't seem to limit that. 30 victory points is not a lot, but if you have a look at the next bit, it shows you how many objectives it recommends. So this one is a 4 objective one. You just put them on the straddling the sort of quarters. This is a 3 location one. This is a 2 location one. So if you think about it, that can, you control 2 or 3 of these. That's like 120 points per turn. 4 of these, I guess, 150 per turn, 6 turns. Like, that's 1,200 points, basically, isn't it? That's my math is off. No, I think it is off. 6, 9, 1,800 points, is it? It's a lot of points. It's fine. Again, it's more admin, more game admin to do during the game, which I think is going to be tricky. And that's sort of my overall thought about this whole entire book, is that I think they've given you a lot of really cool tools. I think they've given you a really good basis for you to take these things, adapt them to suit your own preferences, your own environment, your own ambitions, and then basically go out and host events and improve on it. Overall, I think it's a decent book. I would give it 8.5 out of 10. They've done a really good effort. They've obviously seen what's happening in the meta just now, or what was happening at the time they wrote this book, and they've created some composition to sort of limit this really silly sort of things. I'm hoping this, coupled with some rules changes that are coming in the big 1.5 update, will give us a much more sensible, a much smoother, a much cleaner, and a much more aesthetically pleasing game, especially at competitive level or at events. They've given you ways you can play singles events with more scenarios. They've given you ways you can play doubles, teams events, escalation events, all these bits and pieces. They've essentially given you a toolbox which you can use in your day-to-day games and also in events. And I'm quite excited to see where this goes. I definitely think it's a positive improvement. I'll be picking this book up when it comes out. I can't wait to give it a try. I can't wait to see the events that show up for it. And hopefully you will give it a try too. Please give me a shout. Let me know what you think of this. Always up for hearing you know, your thoughts and opinions on this. See if you think this is a good thing, a bad thing, see if they've missed the ball, or if there's anything in here that I haven't seen. Hopefully this has been worth watching, and if you think that, please give us a big thumbs up, give us a comment, or subscribe to the channel as well. I really do appreciate reading all your comments, and I do respond to them all. So thank you very much for reading it so far, and I hope to see you on the next episode. Thanks very much. Bye bye.